So they're not really getting a chance to develop that film and have it have a presence in the market.
Right.
So I'm talking very softly because the members of the Nose are already talking about movies here. But we're going to do an episode of the Nose, which is our weekly cultural roundtable, and 4 movie savants are in the studio right now, and you can hear them. They're already arguing about movies and discussing things, and so you're going to listen to that. We're not going to do like hot takes or our picks on the Oscars. It's a little bit more of a flavored conversation, but it's totally safe for your use. And so get ready. On the other side of the news, we're going to talk Oscars with these people that you can hear already talking.
In the universe you're talking about in terms of all of these smaller films. I mean, how is it? I mean, Clemency is a labor of love. I mean, I think Alfred wouldn't probably put money. Welcome to the Nose. We're going to do our annual Oscars show today. We always do it with the queen and the mayor of our annual Oscars show, Vivian Nabetta, Director of Marketing and Public Relations these days for Capital Community College. She's in studio with me, along with Rebecca Castellani, music writer for Red Hook Star Revue, Rand Richards-Cooper, a contributing editor at Commonweal, writes the In Our Midst column for Hartford Magazine, James Hanley, the co-founder of Cinestudio at Trinity College, which is where you should see, I would say anyway, as many Oscar-nominated movies as you possibly can. And I should tell you that for production reasons, we're recording this on Wednesday night. You're going to be hearing it probably on Friday if you hear it as a broadcast. And there are various reasons why we're doing it. But I'm just telling you that because, I don't know, because if there's some huge revelation about Jojo Rabbit or something, I mean, that happens on Thursday, we just won't have accommodated for that. I'm actually kind of alarmed by the idea that there might be a revelation about Jojo Rabbit. Now I have to think about what that is. So we'll be talking anyway about these movies that are nominated this year, about what it's like to watch them. We have all kinds of topics here. And we're not going to do hot takes, though. We're going to be deeply thoughtful. So I want to begin by saying that this is a year for me, and I want to hear coming from around the table how this lands, usually among the Best Picture nominees, and there are 9 this year out of a possible 10 slots. And we can talk about things that might have been omitted, but the things that are present, of these 9 movies, I don't dislike any of them. Usually there's some movie that really bothers me that's nominated, and which if it wins, I'm going to be upset. That's just not the case this year. I mean, I've seen all 9 of these movies. I don't really object to any of them. I mean, there's 2 of them that have worn less well with me. But so let's just begin. Well, we might as well begin with the mayor.
Oh, wow.
So
thanks.
I don't know. How are you feeling about this?
I think I'm kind of, to quote Rebecca in an email, but I'm kind of meh. I mean, I think that there are obviously a lot of people that are names that you would know. I have one film that I'm actually excited about that I think was the best. I don't think it's going to win.
Which movie is that?
Parasite.
Oh, I think it might win. But anyway.
Yeah, you're right. I feel like there's a good chance. Like, I mean, certainly in terms of content, there is a range of the types of films. I'm just kind of
How about you, Rand? I mean, any clunkers here for you, or are you happy?
Not really, but it's a little bit like those commercials. I think the AT&T commercials where there's someone who has a surgeon and they ask the nurse, how's the surgeon? Says, oh, he's okay,
right?
And the person says okay, or it's an airline pilot. I have the feeling that with the Academy Awards, like okay is a very low bar, and just as you should expect the surgeon to be more than just okay, so these films should be more than just okay. There's not a film I hate. There are a couple films I'm very ambivalent about, but I feel, I can't help feeling that, and I've thought this before, that the films that were Best Picture nominees when I was a teenager in the 70s, coming of age, and I'm looking down the list here: 5 Easy Pieces, Clockwork Orange, Last Picture Show, Deliverance, American Graffiti, Cries and Whispers, Chinatown, The Conversation, Dog Day Afternoon, Nashville, Coming Home, Apocalypse Now, and these are all films that lost, that didn't even win. And the films that won include The Godfather Part 1 and 2, The Sting, French Connection. So I have this feeling that even if you subtract for old fart crankiness.
Yeah, I got okay boomered about this show, and you're like being more boomery than I.
But even if you subtract for nostalgia and old fart crankiness, I don't think that the films that we're looking at that have won since 2000 rise to the level. And my theory is that a lot of talent has gotten siphoned off into TV. We're living in a golden age of TV, and you probably can't have a golden age of TV and a golden age of cinema at the same time. So I think of this as a pewter age of cinema. So the things that we're going to be talking about are beautiful pieces of pewter.
So if you're sort of like a poor New England family, except that you're not really poor and your father's away at the Civil War doing some god, you might be drinking out of something like this.
Exactly, a
the
pewter chalice.
All right, James, you have the floor.
Well, I have to say, I think there is a sort of nostalgia for films. Certainly for me, having run a theater for 50 years, there are a lot of films from 40, 50 years ago that are really amazing and I have very strong feelings about. But one of the things that's changed to me that really I think is from the other end of it is that for lots of reasons I won't go into, filmmaking has expanded to a much larger group of people. People are making films of significance all over the world and coming from different cultures. And it's not just an American thing anymore. And it's not just about the Academy Awards. And I have to say that looking at films, watching films now, I see a lot of films that don't even appear on these lists, that are not even considered by the Academy. And the whole concept of a prize for the best movie is really, to me, a little tainted by what has happened to the industry, which is that it's become very much more commercially oriented, in particular in theaters, in terms of providing food. That food is the tail that wags the dog in the film industry. And the theaters are actually engaged in bringing people in with films that they spend a great deal of money on food. And that means you have to have a flow of product. You have to have a flow of product which is seen as legitimate and is sort of kind of middle of the road. And I guess what I'm saying is that I liked a lot of the films. I share the idea that there's nothing that I particularly hated, but I liked most of the films. But I also felt that many of the smaller films that we don't have on these lists are ones that affected me most. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been increasing over the years. And so it's an interesting thing that large crowds of people come to see, say, Joker or whatever is the current film of the moment. And then only a tiny crowd comes to the really affecting film that comes from someplace totally left field. That might be an American film, it might be a Nigerian film, it might be a European film or Chinese or whatever. And that actually, the conundrum for me is how can we really pay attention to that? How can we really switch the attention from deciding whether Joker is better than Jojo Rabbit, for example, or better than any others, when there's all of this other talent out there that somehow needs to be recognized?
Right. And I mean, it is, however, something that makes Parasite even more amazing from that point of view.
Yes, that's true.
That it really does seem to be clambering over the seats and getting to the front row. So, Rebecca, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think my litmus test for film is, does this film tell me something new about the world, about a culture, about myself? And I was very underwhelmed with this year's movie's ability to evoke some sort of introspection in myself, save for Parasite. Parasite really is the only film that has stayed with me. I've thought about it repeatedly since watching it. It affected me.
Joker didn't really do that for you.
Joker, if that wins, Colin, I am going to be livid. A movie has never told me anything less in my life. I wish I could get the 2 hours back. I subjected my poor 89-year-old grandmother to watching it with me.
That might not have been a good idea.
That was a bad call. Yeah. Admittedly, that was my fault, but it was terrible.
You traumatized her.
I traumatized my grandmother.
You triggered your grandmother.
I triggered her. I traumatized her. It was terrible. And I am all of the above.
Tell us how you really feel.
So I wanted to, we have to sort of speed date through a lot of this, but I said before we went on the air, I have a one-touch solution. And it doesn't really solve the problem that James is so articulately talking about. And as when we do endorsements at the end, I'm assuming a lot of people are going to endorse some of these movies that kind of didn't get their noses up over the horizon in exactly the way that he described. But obviously there's kind of a problem with, as usual, the kind of unbelievably white field. And well, anyway, here's my one-touch solution. They have 10 slots open. They pick 9 Best Pictures. So Us should be the 10th. Lupita Nyong'o should bump somebody out. I haven't seen Bombshell, but I'm okay bumping Charlize Theron. It's like one of the few movies I haven't seen. But I think you do that. And now, I mean, you can't fix all the flaws, but I think now you have and maybe Jordan Peele. I don't know which director he bumps. I'd have to kind of look at the list and try to figure that out. But I guess Rebecca would be happy if he bumped Todd Phillips out of there. Although actually, I don't think Joker is as bad a movie as she thinks it is. But and you do something like that, and I think you've actually got now it's a harder. Just by including one movie, and I don't understand why
I'm very confused.
Why is us not in there at all?
Was it too early? I know it came out in January, and sometimes those movies that come out at the beginning of the year get forgotten. But it was so good, and it changed the genre.
But I think people campaign too, and you forget that you're. Which surprise, people campaign for awards, but I think that. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it came out early, but I don't know if there was a lot of energy surrounding, and maybe they couldn't because it was made by a smaller film company. Yeah. It's not like it was made by.
Small, though.
Well, Blumhouse does kind of.
So James has a theory.
It has big money. It had big money around it. Mm-hmm. I do think that timing has a lot to do with it because it was not seen by the industry as a tentpole movie. However, it was brought in at the beginning of the summer at a time when it could grab a lot of screens. But it also came and went very quickly because the deal is that if you open it before the tentpoles and you have all these screens, you grab as many as you can, and instead of getting 2,000 screens, you get 4,000. And then everybody sees it really quickly. It becomes a phenomenon. And then as far as the industry is concerned, it's on to the next thing. So when you're actually having parties and people are talking about the Academy Awards, it's so far gone that it's very difficult to bring it back. If you look down all of the years of the awards, many films that came out in the early part of the year didn't make it. And so nowadays, most of they hold their fire until October and November because that gets the media attention. And then if they've got a film they feel reasonably confident in, that's where all the money goes into. So if somebody says, what about us? Then it's very hard to actually get that money into that. And I think that there's also the issue of Us is a kind of very intense, compact film with great acting, and it really is very well done. But it doesn't it doesn't feel like a film that's going to last in the pantheon of Hollywood's sense of, this is a keeper. We're going to actually go to pay attention at the awards. It just doesn't feel like that, unfortunately. And I think there's a lot of films like that.
Well, Rand, I think it's also that it's a genre movie to a certain degree. It's a horror movie. Maybe the Academy doesn't. It came out in March, by the way, and Jonathan McNichol is making the very good point that it's very similar to Parasite in terms of having an overclass, underclass.
Well, I thought that Parasite borrowed from Jordan Peele a great deal of both Get Out and Us. The idea of taking certain tropes that belong to genre films and using them to fashion metaphors for intensely political, racial situations. I was certain that Bong Joon-ho knows Jordan Peele's films very well and was consciously influenced by them. Because Us, with the whole idea of this sort of subterranean underclass that's being exploited, and the doppelganger theme is sort of echoed in Parasite. So, that slot, well, is there like one slot for a film like this? I mean, that's part of the sense you get with the Oscars. It's like, all right, we're going to have one slot for a film that is interesting.
One war, one car, one interpersonal.
Interesting and strange.
Well, they were going to do like that thing where there was going to be a slot for the fun movie, or there was going to be a separate category for fun movies or something.
I think that sometimes they just do the most. At a certain point, it becomes stand by whatever films you nominated. I think nobody wants, although people do get them kind of mercy nominations, but kind of looking at the list and to James's point about films that people will be talking about in the future, and then also to what Rand said about films that lost. You can look at some of these and say we might still be talking about them in 10, 15 years, but I think that a few of them will get lost. And it's like, oh, that one? Yeah. How many people still talk about like A Dances with Wolves? Like how often, that's just the one I thought about the top of my head. But there are a lot of movies that get accolades.
Right. Or The Artist.
Well, that's mine.
Thank
That
you.
is totally mine. Nobody is ever going to watch The Artist ever again.
Has anyone talked about
or
The
Crash.
Artist?
Crash.
Crash is a good one.
Crash. I know that there's a Brokeback Mountain Crash thing. I don't hate Crash as much as I feel like I'm supposed to.
But The Artist really is
The Artist is like,
forgettable.
I will never understand.
Chicago.
But, there's another aspect of this that's kind of interesting to me, that Us is an interesting sort of cultural phenomenon that is familiar in horror genre, but also American genre. The whole sort of everything that surrounds it, and a very clever director and good actors have produced something that is very much a genre that, when that plays outside of the country, in other cultures, it's seen kind of differently. There's a lot of interesting angles to that, including race. But the other aspect is with Parasite, that there was a writer, I think in the British Guardian newspaper earlier this week, was writing about Parasite and saying, Americans see in Parasite what they want to see about class and how that class act plays out and who wins and who loses. But in some ways, from the South Korean perspective, it's actually the opposite.
Oh, really?
that it's actually can be interpreted the other way. So there's a kind of irony about who's the winner in that. So I was kind of intrigued about that, because here you are with a film that has taken off in American culture and perhaps being understood within that lens.
So you're suggesting, just to sort of make it clear for people at home, because actually when we were leaving that movie, I said to my significant other, or she said to me, I wonder how that movie plays in South Korea. Now, my assumption was that the class divisions and the economic divisions in South Korea, which I know to be even more severe than they are in this country in terms of concentration of wealth and who gets left out, would be that it would be an exacerbated take on the one that we're having, which is that here are these 1%ers who are fools, and then here are these people who have nothing, who are in many ways more adept and talented than they are, et cetera, et cetera.
Yet they have nothing. Yet they are not valued. They're living in a miserable place, and they're folding pizza boxes, and they may be very clever and very capable, and they're able to apparently in this movie subvert the rich people. But if you could interpret it differently, sort of culturally. And that's not the only two films. I mean, there's lots of other things that, when at Cinestudio, when we show some of these films from lesser known sources and people who are not familiar with these films, you have a first reaction, which is your familiar reaction, and then you begin to find out more about the film. And maybe you find out that the actual story that being told is slightly different. And I think Jojo Rabbit, in a way, falls in that category too.
First of all, maybe do we have a clip from Jojo Rabbit? Maybe we should play that. Yeah, so let's play this. That's we're going to play. You're going to hear Taika Waititi, who's the writer and director of Jojo Rabbit, and also plays this kind of dreamlike imaginary friend who is Adolf Hitler, of this young German boy who's growing up in a town in Germany toward the end of World War II. That's Roman Griffin Davis as Jojo. Let's hear a little conversation that they're having.
Poor Jojo. What's wrong, little man?
Hi, Adolf.
Want to tell me about that rabbit incident? What was all that about?
They wanted me to kill it. I'm sorry. I couldn't.
Don't worry about it. I couldn't care less.
But now they call me a scared rabbit.
Let them say whatever they want. People used to say a lot of nasty things about me. Oh, this guy's a lunatic. Oh, look at that psycho. He's going to get us all killed. I'll let you in on a little secret. The rabbit is no coward. The humble little bunny faces a dangerous world every day, hunting carrots for his family, for his country. My empire will be full of all animals. Lions, giraffes, zebras, rhinoceroses, octopuses, rhinoctopuses, even the mighty rabbit. Cigarette?
Oh, no thanks, I don't smoke.
Let me give you some really good advice. Be the rabbit. The humble bunny can outwit all of his enemies. He's brave and sneaky and strong. Be the rabbit.
This is one of these movies that you really can't describe to a person who hasn't seen it. It won't make any sense. But I have to hear Rand about this, a person who lived in Germany for a long time. But before that, Rebecca, I saw some body language going on there. Were you crossing your heart because of your love for Taika Waititi?
I actually haven't seen the movie, I have to admit, but I love Taika Waititi. I think he's one of the most exciting directors to watch. I think his take on the Marvel Universe and Thor Ragnarok was one of the best Marvel movies I've ever seen. So I just love him. And I love him from all the way back in the day with Flight of the Conchords and all that good stuff.
All right, so Rand,
Well, he
Jojo
also
Rabbit.
did a film. He's made a number
Hunt for
of
the Wilder
very
People?
different films. He did
Yeah.
a film called Boy,
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
which is about a young boy, rather the same age as Jojo, who's living in an impoverished community, in a remote Maori community in New Zealand, and Waititi himself plays his sort of feckless, shambling father who's been in prison and comes back, much to this kid's excitement, and then profoundly disappoints him. So it had some of the similar sort of child-centered themes of this movie, but it was done in a straightforward, realistic mode. This is a very challenging movie because Jojo Rabbit, because you have to work these two different impulses at once, and you have to accept the idea of using a fey whimsicality to try to encounter and encompass, fascist evil. And that's very hard to do. It forces you to sort of double track, and it is in that way a very cerebral movie. But I really resisted it at first, and then I sort of fell under its sway. It seemed like a European, even like a German movie to me, in its willingness to be absurdist and to not keep these categories that Americans like to keep so separate, to not keep them separate, to try to use irony and absurdity to encounter evil. And so in the middle part of the movie, I kind of was, it's going to work. But in the end, it didn't work for me, and maybe I wasn't up to it. But it seemed like I can't really joke about these things. I went halfway through it, and then I just kind of stalled. And in this sort of manipulated, guardedly happy ending, where he's dancing, I actually really dislike that.
Although I wonder, given your
alert.
your nostalgia for some of the movies of the past, I mean, Dr. Strangelove is something that you can't really joke about,
Right.
except that we joked about it. So
Right.
I wonder if we've
I'm
gotten a
thinking of
little
the
bit more
producers.
serious.
I really like the attempt of
Oh,
this
that's
movie,
right, the
but I
producers
just
didn't.
wasn't sure that it actually worked.
Yeah. So there's so many things I want to ask about, but I think we should probably take a break right now, and then we'll come back and we'll ask about more of these things when we do that. Okay, here's a break.
Midnight, one more night without sleeping, watching till the morning comes creeping. Green door, oh what's that secret you're keeping? There's an old piano and they play it hiding behind the green.
Arthur, I have some bad news for you.
You don't listen, do you? I don't think you ever really hear me. You just ask the same questions every week. How's your job? Are you having any negative thoughts? All I have are negative thoughts. But you don't listen anyway. I said, for my whole life, I didn't know if I even really existed. But I do. And people are starting to notice.
They've cut our funding. We're closing down our offices next week. The city has cut funding across the board. Social services is part of that. This is the last time we'll be meeting.
Okay.
Very sorry to Rebecca's grandmother if she happens to be listening right now. It's bringing the whole thing back up again. No, so the question that I wanted to ask, and we're here, by the way, with Rebecca Castellani and Vivian Nabetta, James Hanley, Rand Richards Cooper. So I think one thing that may happen this year is that Renee Zellweger may win for Best Actress in a movie that a lot of people didn't like that much, but it's sort of hard to get away from her performance being amazing. And that Joaquin Phoenix may do exactly the same kind of thing, that he may win Best Actor in a movie that people like Rebecca regard as morally and artistically bankrupt, but it's kind of hard to get away from the performance. So I guess I'm going to challenge you on that one a little bit and just say, given everything that you feel about Joker, is there still room for you to interpret Phoenix's performance, particularly the kinetic aspects of this performance, as something remarkable?
I mean, yes. Is it remarkable that he can do what he does with his body objectively? Yes. Is that enough for me to connect with an act, with a performance? No, I did not find. I thought there was isolated moments that, yes, I can see that takes talent. The maniacal laughter that sits with you. He clearly pushed his body and his voice and all of this to the extreme. But does that mean the performance is good? Just because it's extreme, I don't think so. I don't think there was anything in that. Yes, was he emoting? Yes. But I found that instead of connecting and really sympathizing, my eyes were hitting the ceiling every 5 minutes. It just felt like overdone. I had very little sympathy for the way he portrayed the character. So I think when I went into Joker, I had some reservations, but I also was really optimistic, and this is why I watched it with my grandmother. I was really hopeful that it was going to be this really interesting insight into this incel culture that has, become such a phenomenon in our culture. And it was going to tell me something that I didn't know about that made me empathize with this class of, troubled young men that continue to perpetuate extreme acts of violence in this country. I was hoping for that, and all I got was this glorification of white male rage. And, do we really need a movie that celebrates that he's finally accepted by his peers when he shoots somebody? I mean, that...
Well, I wonder if I don't know whether it celebrates or glorifies.
He gets lifted on top of the cop car in the last scene with everyone chanting how much they adore him, and it ends.
Bunch of incels. Anyway, well, I want to go around the table here a little bit more about this, and whether you're talking about Phoenix, James, or Zellweger, there are a lot of these performances where sometimes you have to sort of pull them out of the movie and say, well, what's the performance like?
Well, I think you could sort of, objectively say that he put a lot of work in the performance. But to me, the real lacking thing in Joker is the writing.
Yes.
The story is not really interesting to me. It's like what you're doing really is you started sort of in the studio conference with a character, and then you've brought in writers to sort of write the story kind of thing. And much as Joaquin Phoenix is a really intricate and interesting actor in most films, the problem is that at every turn in Joker, the scriptwriters went to stereotype and went to things that really, to me, just like, okay, so this happens to him, so now he's going to do this, and yes, he's going to kill the social worker, and the end,
mommy
actually,
issues. It's like
mommy
ticks
issues,
every
right?
box.
And then he has the angular relationship with the person, in his apartment building, and then the end of the film, to me, is what really hit me about the bad writing was that they didn't really know how to end it, and so they ended it with a kind of chaos, really also throwing dirt on demonstrators who would like making demonstrators out to be devils, masked devils, who are going to come out at every opportunity and destroy everything at the end. And the film doesn't really lead up to meaning that at all. So that's where the film, it's curious that you can get a major actor play really a complex role in terms of his behavior in the role, but it doesn't go anywhere.
But Rand, that still leaves us with the rise above question. Can Zellweger rise above whatever the flaws of Judy might be? Can Phoenix rise above whatever well-articulated flaws of Joker might be?
I think if you dislike the movie as much as Rebecca did, then someone who's acting very capably in the service of that movie may not be doing a good thing because he's making a terrible film more terrible in a way. I found his performance mesmerizing, and I found the look of the film. The thing I didn't like this movie. I liked it least of all the movies, but for most of it, I found the look of the film.
Stylistically, it was cool.
This sort of summoning of what apparently is about 1979, late 70s, early 80s New York City, in all of its grunginess, the sort of the Bernard Goetz moment, which is explicitly quoted, in the film, in the action of the film.
And that was one of the most annoying things. One of the most annoying things about the tropes about New York City.
Right, but it in a comic book sense, it created an atmosphere of degradation and depravity that I found visually captivating. That was the thing that I liked about the film, although to like that is a complicated thing. I thought the ending of the film was a disaster and also very strange. The homage paid very specifically to two Martin Scorsese films, Taxi Driver, and the king of comedy. Now, I will say I love the king of comedy. It's one of the most underrated Martin Scorsese films, but it's
that had a script. It had a real intense character.
And Arthur Fleck plays what's the De Niro character in that? What's his name?
Rupert Pupkin.
Yeah, Rupert Pupkin, who plays the character that Arthur Fleck plays here, a disgruntled and dissatisfied would-be stand-up comic. Of course, the fun with that was that now De Niro is a talk show host in the current movie, where he was the Arthur Fleck, Rupert Pupkin character. Although De Niro is a talk show host, by the way, didn't work at all. But so I thought, literally at the end of the movie, he had no idea what he was doing. But have an explosion of violence, pay tribute to two Scorsese films, have a mob in the street, and we're out of here. So this was one of those films that had something going, and then just completely fell apart at the end.
So I want to switch gears a little bit here. I'm not going to put Vivian on the spot because she hasn't seen Joker, but instead I'm going to get Vivian to get us started on another thing I wanted to talk about, which is one thing that I made a point of doing this time was seeing as many of these movies as I could in a movie theater, and ideally on pretty good equipment. I mean, I will say, not to praise James and his presence, but Trinity Cinestudio, I saw Ford versus Ferrari there. I think it's a movie that just has a story if you watch it on a television set. If you watch it on a movie screen, it's a movie, and these things go on that I'm sure he'll be very happy to talk about. And I saw 1917 in a BTX format, and I tried to see a bunch of movies at Spotlight down in Front Street because I think their equipment's pretty good there.
That is an underappreciated theater, by the way.
So, I mean, I do feel like, a lot of the people voting on this stuff, I know for a fact they all get screeners, mailed to their houses, and they watch an awful lot of the movies not that way. And there's also something about watching a movie with other people, whether it's you're watching Dolomite and people are laughing at the stuff that you're laughing at, or in the case of Jojo Rabbit, I happened to be sitting behind a row of people that included it was a mother and father who'd brought their two sons who looked like they were like 8 and 10, having completely misjudged what kind of movie this was.
That's amazing.
It's got a rabbit in it, and it's got a kid in it.
That's
it's got to be fun.
amazing.
So that was kind of a weird thing just to be processing. But maybe just talk a little bit about seeing movies in theaters versus on your home theater.
Slight aside, I had a similar experience years and years ago with other Nose member Jacques Lamar. We went to go see Bad Santa, one of the 2 movies in my life I've ever walked out of, and somebody brought a child, and it was an experience.
Yep.
But yeah, I do think that there is a level of I think this is what's happening because of streaming and because of people's ability to see films in different ways, that movies there's this kind of divide between big films and smaller films. And for me, I don't go to the movies that much. I like to watch movies in my home. I'm so sorry for those of you who are different than me. There are some films that I will tell you I will go see. And when I think about smaller films or films that kind of need that box office, I'm happy to go and spend my money on that experience because it also feels different, right? Because it feels like you're having this communal experience where you're supporting something and you're behind it. Whereas I'm just going to use a Marvel film. They don't
need your money.
Yeah, they don't need it. They don't need it. They're going to make multi-millions of dollars. And so Iron Man doesn't care if I see it. It doesn't matter. I like to feel like when I'm going to a film, it feels special to me. Sometimes it is a communal experience. But I also think that sometimes we can't be we just can't be too judgmental or too picky about the medium, because sometimes you can watch a film. If somebody sees a film that moves them, that is profound, that changes them in some way, does it really matter to a certain extent if they saw it on the iPhone? I understand.
Yeah, let's hear Rand on that.
Yeah.
I'm doing a Bernie Sanders.
Okay.
I was going to say that was very Bernie.
I do
I wrote that down, Bill.
I do divide films into the films I'm willing to see to whom the films I'm not. I will say when you're watching a film at home, this seems obvious, but like in the theater, you can't leave, you can't pause, you can't go to the fridge. You're going to have a continuous watching experience. And I've watched many films at home where, I stop it to do something else. I shouldn't admit this, I guess, but the film gets chopped up. You don't necessarily have the same experience. Some films require an immersive experience. You get a much more immersive experience, especially if it's a big screen. When I watch Ford vs. Ferrari, a film I don't really like very much, but this was hilarious. I came out of the theater on New Park Avenue, and I got in my car, and I'm driving home, and I realized that I'm driving like 1,000,000 miles an hour, right. And I'm looking at these cars in front of me, like as in a video game. I'm going to pass this guy on New Park Avenue. I started to pass him. I'm like, what? Are you crazy? You're going to pass this guy on New Park Avenue? And then I realized I had been so in the action. And that wouldn't have happened. Absolutely wouldn't have happened. It was in my home. The other kind of film where I think it's crucial, sometimes the visuals are so important. I would recommend Terrence Malick's new film, didn't get any nominations, called A Hidden Life. And it's about a conscientious objector in Austria in World War II who stands up to Hitler and pays for it with his life. It's a true life story. But the role that the mountains surrounding that village play it's not just beautiful scenery. Those mountains have a particular role in the iconography of German filmmaking, and they relate to Nazi mythology. The shining white mountains, they're crucial. The size of those mountains is crucial to actually the meaning that the film
I think
delivers.
any Malick movie. I mean, I think Tree of Life is. I mean, you may decide the Tree of Life has no point, no matter what you do. But if you didn't see it on a big screen, I've seen it twice on a big screen. Yeah, you'd be sitting there going, "Why in the world was this movie ever made?" And I could name a bunch of others.
But like a Noah Baumbach film, not necessarily.
Right, but I do want to point out too, but also too, there's a privilege between being able to have a theater experience.
Yeah,
and I think that's also something when we talk about, you have to go see it on the big screen. You have to. Well, if I am hard of hearing or if I am deaf and they do not provide captions, and for a lot of people, they've had. In that community, I don't want to speak for that community, but I do want to say that for many people, it's a privilege. If you have visual impairments and you need your film audio described, for a lot of people, there's also that comfort of just being at home, being at your home. Like I agree with you. I understand that there's something to be, if that's accessible to you, to be able to see something on a big screen. But I also think that some of it is. You meet people where they are, and I think streaming meets and streaming. And I understand, you might lose something in the aspect ratio and this and this and this, and you want to be able to have it, but people can feel very deeply. And when I'm at home. And when I'm having I don't want to cry in a movie theater in front of other people.
Oh, I have no hesitation about doing that.
I do. I'm like, I don't want to do
I want to hear
that,
everybody else on this. We'll let James go last because I think he's the warrior here.
My problem with movie theaters is twofold. One, it is so expensive to go to the movies. If you are a couple that are going out to the movies and you're not going on Tuesday when they get those sweet deals, which is the only time now I'll go to the movies, is when it's $5. But otherwise, you're looking at, for a couple people, it's $25, and you get a concession on top of that, and you're suddenly spending $35. That is not something that I can do on a regular basis.
Sneak the candy in.
I do usually, but I can't. Can I admit that? But
no,
I do that because it's actually illegal for them not to, I think. But anyways, my other big problem with theaters, and increasingly the older I get, I have this problem, is I get very overwhelmed, like sensorily wise, like the talking of people around me, the presence of people around me, and it does actually take me out of the film versus when I'm sitting at home and I can control all of my surroundings, I can be a lot more immersed in the film because I'm not thinking like, okay, well, if I have to go up, what if I've got to pee? I got to get up, miss part of the movie. I know this is like upsetting to all of the older set, but it's just the nature of my relationship. I'm more comfortable.
If we can make it through without peeing with our old prostates, you can hold it. I got all the way through the Irishman.
Why should I? Why should I deny myself the luxury of relieving my bladder just for like
makes
this
you a better person. That's
sanctimonious understanding of a theater?
Toughen up.
Rub some dirt in it.
So James, one of the things that you taught me about decades and decades ago was sound. And I think one of the first things you were telling me about what's that Blair Brown William Hurt movie where there's like a heartbeat that comes from the back of the theater.
Yes.
I saw one of the Superman movies at your theater where General Zod and his people break through a brick wall and it comes right at you from the side. If the sound is up at the right level, if it's engineered in the way that James and his people do, there is like just a completely different experience just with that. But anyway, I should let you have the floor.
Well, I think what we're talking about here is control of environment. And it's certainly true that lots of people are going to see films on streaming. I've seen students in film classes watching films in double speed. Netflix offers double and triple speed, so you can watch it like in much less time. And I understand, there are lots of reasons for these different means of seeing, and I agree about accessibility and the cost of tickets and so on. But I think for a place like Cinestudio, for example, there's a certain small group of theaters around the world who are really concerned about controlling the environment to get it to the most. It's sort of like a film institute, sort of like the highest art, if you like. We spend a lot of time. We're lucky we have a building with 4 foot, 6 foot thick walls. So that allows us to do something called reverberated sound, which nobody can do in regular theaters because building materials are so flimsy now that the whole theater shakes. And so you get a very muddy sound in a theater built of brick and oak, which we're lucky to have. That is not a problem. You can actually run the sound with reflection off those surfaces, and it sounds good. The other thing is that in spite of people sometimes spending a couple of $100,000 on a home theater, the one thing you cannot approximate is the actual movement of air in a theater, which is the sound. And that's one of the reasons why Ford v. Ferrari sounded spectacular and why you have these incredible effects, because we put in loudspeakers that are capable of moving all of the air in a very large space. And your body perceives that in different ways. You feel it as well as you hear it. And it can be very subtle, like, for instance, a Terrence Malick film like Days of Heaven, which that was one of the first films we showed at Cinestudio. We were one of the first theaters with Dolby sound. And it was really extraordinary that what was really getting you was the clicking of the fire starting to burn. You heard the embers burning in the air, and you heard the rush of the wind from the fire starting to build. It was actually very subtle, but it was doing the same thing. It was using the movement of air. And I tell that sort of technical side of things. Of course, it has all sorts of other aspects to it, but there's a certain group of people who want to come and experience that in a way like 2001: A Space Odyssey, for example, and be in an environment where the control is essentially exerted by the director of the film, who is given instructions. 2001, for example, Kubrick had all sorts of provisos about running it in 70 millimeter and doing it with the sound set a certain way. And there's a whole craft in the industry which knows how to do that. But at the same time, media being what it is, people consume it in different ways. And I would say certainly, take a film like Us, for example. I think that somebody who watches Us on a cell phone, yes, they experience the film and the performance, but they have not experienced the fright of an audience in the dark.
I did see in the theater, yes.
Me too.
And actually
Agreed.
sort of reacting and seeing it larger than life.
Yeah, you want that gasp together.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to have to go to a break here. I have to say two things. First of all, over the course of the past year, wonderful panelists like the ones that you're hearing here right now have talked about 15 Oscar-nominated movies that are accounting for 71 Academy Award nominations. We've got them all up at wnpr.org/Colin, and you can see the Nose's Guide to the 92nd Academy Awards, all the conversations we had about all of these different movies. And so if you feel like at the end of this, I just didn't get enough of the Nose, you can. We're going to go out with a song sung by Cynthia Erivo, who is nominated for the movie Harriet and is both a singer and a songwriter and also killing it in The Outsider on HBO as well. So anyway, here we go.
I've been walking with my face turned to the sun. Weight on my shoulders, a bullet in my gun.
Okay, we're back. This is The Nose. Before we run out of time, I want to thank Rebecca Castellani, Rand Richards-Cooper, James Hanley, and Vivian Nabetta for being the panelists here. Jonathan McPants produced the whole thing, and he and I, well, except that, we figured out that we didn't have enough mics, and so like Gene Amatruda put in a mic within the last half hour before we went on the air in this kind of slightly newly configured studio. Someday the history of Connecticut Public Radio is going to be written. It's basically going to be the story of Gene Amatruda, and then he got a bunch of people to talk into microphones and produce shows and stuff like that, and nobody will even care what our names are. And that's rightly so. All right, so yeah, we're going to give people a chance to do endorsements, but I think the right way to endorse probably is to recommend a movie that you feel maybe didn't get a lot of love here. I don't know, Vivian, you want to get us started?
Sure. I'm going to get you started, but we're going to kind of go back to the beginning a little bit. It did get a lot of accolades, but I do want to recommend Us if you have not seen it, only because not just for the conversation we had, but really Lupita really did. She did that, as they would say. She did that. Didn't she do that?
She did that, yeah.
And I can't say enough about her.
Yeah, she's a star.
No, that's an amazing performance, and it's really two performances.
It really is.
And anyway, we shouldn't even say more than that if you haven't seen the movie. All right, how about you, Rand?
Two films. A film that did get nominated in two categories, documentary and Best International Film, is called Honeyland, and it's about a middle-aged woman in a village in remote North Macedonia who's caring for her 90-year-old mother, and the younger woman is a beekeeper. And it's partly about beekeeping, but it's also about fractious neighborly relations in this small village. The second film that didn't get nominated for anything is a film by the German director Christian Petzold called Transit. And Petzold it deals with sort of the lingering issues of World War II. And Transit is a strange film. It's about Nazi-occupied Paris, France, but it's set, it's seemingly, in now. So it's this weird mixture of historical eras. It's about the problems of refugees. And essentially it's kind of like Casablanca refracted through Kafka. It's a strange and elusive movie, and the star Frank Rogowski bears a bizarre resemblance to Joaquin Phoenix. That this film did not get a nomination for Best International Film seems very strange to me. It's the kind of film that leaves a lot of questions, and you go away thinking more and more about it, and it just stays with you through weeks. Transit.
I think you can see that on Amazon, not that you necessarily
Yes, you
should.
can,
James, how about you?
Yeah, I agree about those two films. And actually, one of the reasons why you didn't see it more widely is because it's streaming and because it's in other places that it's very hard to get people to invest in advertising. And so it's a sort of it's a vicious circle that does these films in. There are two films that I absolutely loved, really amazing films. The same thing happened. A Hidden Life, the Terrence Malick film, and also Clemency, with an incredible performance by Alfre Woodard, who is like just, I mean, she is the absolute epitome of the stupidity of Hollywood's attitude to women older than 40. She has an ability to bring that character forth in that film. Clemency and A Hidden Life, those are my two.
All right, Rebecca, how about you?
Alfre.
I'll go lowbrow for everyone. How
Okay,
about that?
we like that.
I really, really enjoyed Booksmart. I thought that was a fantastic, funny movie.
It's not that lowbrow.
No, he didn't like it,
Rand
Rand.
didn't
Not
like it.
surprised that Rand didn't like it. I also really enjoyed, and this is a shock that these words are leaving my mouth, I really enjoyed Midsommar. I do not like horror at all, but I thought that movie was beautifully done. It's a great example of horror where the violence doesn't feel gratuitous. It feels very intentional and thoughtful. So I really enjoyed Midsommar, which is surprising. And lastly, simply because we didn't get to it, we really should have, I really enjoyed Hustlers, and I wish that Jennifer Lopez had gotten her nomination because girl learned to pole dance, and that's
right.
hard.
We were going to have a whole big conversation about the Super Bowl halftime show, and there's just no time to do
So
that.
shout out to J-Lo.
All right, so I'm glad this one's still left over for me. Last Black Man in San Francisco, which we talked about on the news. I think this is an amazing movie. I do wish it could be. I mean, they made it for not much money. Brad Pitt is the reason, by the way, that they had any money.
Yes.
But they made it for not much money, and it kind of looks it and feels it, and like the audio is not as sharp as I want it to be. There's some stuff about it that I wish could be tuned up a little bit. But I mean, the idea is amazing. The Shakespeare is amazing. The score, which is very sort of French impressionist, Satie Fauré sounding, but not. I mean, it's written by somebody. I thought that score and the score for Parasite were kind of overlooked. Parasite score, I kept thinking, is this like a Mozart piece that I don't know or something? Except that it isn't. It's all written by this Korean composer who's like writing in that stuff. But Last Black Man in San Francisco, which is about gentrification and it's about lost inheritances and myths that families live with and stuff. I really love this movie, and it's certainly not an Oscar movie. I've got a few seconds left, so this is not. I'm going to recommend the actress rather than the movie. This movie, Wild Rose, which is not an Oscar movie, but I'm going to especially recommend it for fans of The Nose because Jessie Buckley, who's in this movie, she's the star of the movie, and she's also in Judy as the kind of amanuensis to Judy Garland, is just a dead ringer for our own Carolyn Payne. So much so that like Carolyn Payne is getting this from lots of other people. That this young woman, particularly in her Wild Rose performance, which is about a young Scottish woman who wants to sing country music. It's like not the greatest movie in the world, but if you watch it if you stream it, you won't lose that much in terms of the kind of value that James typically delivers. And you can.
She really does look like
Oh,
Carolyn.
it's uncanny.
That's scary.
The movement of the face.
Talk
and stuff
about
like that,
doppelgangers.
It gets really weird at a certain point. Well, listen, thanks very much for coming in here on a Wednesday night. You're going to be hearing this on Friday. Thanks so much to Jonathan McNichol, who made all of this happen, and Gina Amatruda. There's no way we could possibly explain everything that Gina Amatruda does here, but included drilling a hole in the table that we're sitting at like 30 minutes before we got on the air, or maybe 15 minutes. Anyway, thanks to everyone.
Talking, joking, talking about this and talking about that, and talk about everything as a matter of fact. Oh yeah, talk about Torrington, Vernon, Danbury, Waterbury, Alderberry, Woodbury, hitting on New Britain, Vernon, I already said that one, Avon, Farmington, yeah.